welcome. Thank you so much for coming. And this is I believe, the 5th annual reading of poetry and prose for us senior citizens of our community and my class. And these are, am I right? Is it 5, I think? 4? It's 5. Let's say 5. You know, no one would have ever contested it, and I think we're in the... anyway, I just wanted, I mean, I always say the same thing, but my students, these great writers who are going to read for you today, they just always continue to amaze me. I think I've heard it all. I think, well, you know, how can there be any new surprises, anything that I haven't heard before, and I'm always surprised, and they constantly move me with their passion and their honesty and their truth, and their great sense of humor, and the combination makes for some of the best writing I've ever heard. And it's so great that we can get together here, that we have the opportunity, thanks to several people who I will be mentioning in a moment, that we have the opportunity for you to hear them. Well, I want to thank, of course, President Dugan, who could not be here today. He's a very busy man. But of course, he's very instrumental, in this thing starting. Linda Warbell, who just, I can't say enough about Linda. She's our Vice President of Government and Community Relations, and she really helped me. I mean, when I wanted to begin this reading series, she was so encouraging, so supportive, and I really always appreciate what she does for us, for all of us. And Rich Relkin, who is our communications director, for his support, and also Rob Oliva and Joe Acerito from Special Events, and they really just help make things go very smoothly, and just also so wonderful and helpful. So that was so I once again I just feel so blessed. Blessed really is the word. I am not, I could say I'm the teacher of this group that gets together every week, but I can't. My students teach me, and I say that too, and they inspire me. And whenever I leave that class, usually held on a weekend, a Sunday afternoon, whenever I leave that class, I just feel that life is wonderful, and I want to go home and write. And I think all of us feel that way when we leave that class. It's just, I've held my breath so many times listening to their stories and poems. I've held my breath so many times, I'm really beginning to suffer from some respiratory problems. So, I mean, it's just, it took me about an hour to write that joke. No, it really just came to me. Okay, so, if I have my program. The title of our program is A Rainbow Bridge of Light, Voices from the Universe. And if you notice, there's a beautiful little painting of 2 swans on the cover. One of our great writers who has been taking this class for over, Ellen Prescott, has been for how long now? At least 12, 13 years. She's also, besides being a great writer, she's also an artist and a painter, and she was kind enough to design our cover, and she also happened to write a poem called Autumn's Flames, from which I took the title A Rainbow Bridge of Light. And you can see it's on the inside page, just to read it very quickly, but to give it justice. The longest distance between 2 points is a rainbow bridge of color, a rainbow bridge of light, when all will come together in hand and dance in the circle of life. Our universe ties us together. We are one as the moon, as the sun, as a raindrop, as a snowflake, as a grain of sand, as a leaf, as a flower. We are one. And I think that's so true about what we do together every week. And just we bridge all ages and all generations, genders and ethnicities, and there's so much color to our class, and it reminds me of really an artist, a painter, because there is so much color, so much richness in the writing that takes place there. This one's also happened to remind me of a poem by W.B. Yeats, and I'm reading Yeats after you, called The Wild Swans at Cool. And I just wanted to, just read one stanza from that poem, but I really recommend reading the whole poem. Unwearied still, lover by lover, they paddle in the cold, companionable streams, or climb the air. Their hearts have not grown old. Passion or conquest, wander where they will, attend upon them still. And I think that says a lot for what we do here. So I don't want to spend too much time with my introductory remarks, but I had to say something. We begin, the way we do this is, I'll introduce the first reader, who will be Ellen Prescott, and then everyone will come up, certain order from which they'll be coming up to read, and they'll be introducing themselves, okay? So, without further ado, great writer, artist, what more can I say? I read her poetry, showed her picture. Ellen Prescott, thank you.
If I'm nervous, it's because I'm nervous. So, stay with me. If I were to sing Professor Mitch Levenberg's praises, I can only say I'm not ready to sing, but to praise him, yes. He's the best. I'm certain I'm not alone in this regard, and you will probably hear more agreeable commentary as to why Professor Mitch Levenberg is so valued an instructor. Over time, the idea of giving prompts as an assignment at the end of each class for the next class became Mitch's format. So what is a prompt? Webster defines prompt to move to action, to incite, to assist by suggestion or saying. Mitch's prompts are purely optional, and to me not only fun, but inspiring, imaginative, and useful in producing a written piece. The prompt given for the piece presented is as follows. A man at a dinner party makes a startling announcement about the woman sitting next to him. Here is what the prompt became. I call this short story A Halloween Night, and it was written this past October 2013. I hope it entertains you as much as it did me in writing it. This extraordinary experience, dear listener, actually happened, and it is for that reason alone that this is being written. You will no doubt offer your disbelief, but nonetheless, it is the truth. What you do with it is up to you. I was invited to a very special dinner party, coincidentally on Halloween, celebrating my dear friend's success as a leading author and recipient of the Nobel Prize for Literature. I'm certain you're familiar with her scholarly work, Alison Beauchamp's The Hypnotic Effect of Good and Evil. Well, at the dinner party, I had the honor of being seated next to Dr. Stephen Polgar, the great Hungarian physician, renowned mesmerist, and master of illusion. I'm sure you're familiar with him too. The dinner party was by candlelight, requiring formal dress. I must say, everyone there appeared quite elegant. Seated on my left was Dr. Polgar's beautiful companion, whose name I learned was Gisela. The candlelight added to the intimacy of the occasion, and it gave everyone an unusual, softened, but somewhat veiled appearance, with highlights flickering on and off everyone's face. The lighting itself was almost hypnotic. The chatter was in polite low tones, except for intermittent laughter. However, I noticed as the light shone on Gazella's wonderfully structured, bony face, it revealed a strange, otherworldly, odd look about her, almost trance-like. Her eyes, transfixed, were staring directly into the candle's light, glistened as I've never seen anyone's eyes glisten before in that manner. I was captivated. As I noticed, so were the other guests. While I turned in Gazella's direction in order to engage conversation, I must admit I do not readily see well without my glasses, which I had left at home. But as I spoke, there was no response. Her reaction seemed to be wooden, and I wondered if English was her language and/or if she heard me. I tried again, over the appetizer, then the soup, and finally deciding she was uncomfortable, directed my conversation to Polgar when he quite unexpectedly announced, "Gazella will not answer you. She is a dummy." "Oh," I exclaimed, taken quite aback, somewhat embarrassed. After all, to call his companion a dummy out loud like that was so boorish. "Please," I whispered, "no need to shout. I'm certain you've hurt Gazella's feelings. You may have difficulties, but And Polgar interrupted, "She does not have a mind of her own. There is no but. However, she will be able to speak to you soon, without me for a while. What is your name, madame?" "Victoria," I replied. "Very well. Speak to Victoria, Gazella." At first, Gazella did not respond. The silence was almost deafening. Everyone sitting at the table so still, waiting. I found myself at the edge of my chair when finally, as the loud grandfather clock in the foyer struck 11, Gazella spoke. "He calls me a dummy, but I am not a dummy. He is without a soul. He demeans me and controls my very being. He treats me as if I have no feelings, but I do. See for yourself." Then Dr. Polgar shouted at Gazella, "How dare you say such things about me, you ungrateful witch?" While Gazella spoke simultaneously. "You can't silence me now," she replied. "It has been granted so. I am a spirit of the earth, a branch from a tree. I was already grown into my feminine form. Then I was severed. Yes, brutally cut from my mother tree trunk, sold, and finally sculptured into the creature you see before you. And at the 11th hour on this Halloween, for which I've waited so long, my spirit is to be released, and I am able for this short time to speak before I flee from this humiliation. I choose to be free, and at last free, I spit at him." And, my dear, that is actually what happened. After she spit, she seemed to come apart, falling back in her chair as if life left her. Her beautiful large brown eyes, once so full of light, seemed lifeless and was staring up at the ceiling. Her lovely, thick, crowned black hair fell wildly down about her face and shoulders. "Gazella!" Polgar shouted. "Stop acting! Sit up, you stupid witch, or I'll fold you up and put you in your suitcase." But again, she did not respond. I was dumbfounded. In fact, everyone was. No one could speak, including my friend, the hostess, as Polga pulled and lifted Gazella from her chair, who no longer appeared at all human, but rather inanimate, as a life-sized mannequin. Polga's face turned a bright red. His eyes narrowed as he said, "We go now. Yes, we go now. I am sorry. Please excuse us. Thank you for inviting us," as he carried Gazella away from the table. "Please don't get up," he replied to my friend, the hostess. "I'll get our coats from the foyer." Bowing to her and to her guests, he said, "Thank you. Thank you, Madame Beaucamp. I am so sorry I caused this trouble." That was the first and the last time I ever saw Polga and Gazella. And some things, I guess, are just inexplicable. Can you imagine anything like this happening? I still can't believe what happened, except that it did on a Halloween night.
My name is Alice Delury. Over many years, I have desultorily kept a journal. And whenever I read it over, I find the repeated hand-wringing lamentation. I haven't written a creative word in months. Why am I not writing? And on and on. Finally, the Holy Spirit, in exasperation, thrust before my eyes a little notice about the SFC Writers Group. But when I called to register, the person answering the phone said they were full up. My husband, to paraphrase the poet Christina Rossetti, subscribes to the philosophy that rules, like pie crust, are made to be broken. "Just go," he said. "Lots of those who registered won't show." And so I did, and so it was. This will be my 4th year as a member. What happens during those 2-hour Sunday sessions? Hard to say. I do know that my fellow attendees have obviously improved. I now have a nice big pile of completed work to my credit. What is Mitch's secret? Also hard to say. What with my hearing and the fact that his voice resembles the horse whisperers, his comments, many of them are lost to me. I mean no offense, Professor Levenberg. His criticisms are of the mildest sort. The worst he can bring himself to say at a piece of mind-numbing, boring, pointless writing is, "I think you've got something there." What would I do if these Sunday sessions were taken away? I don't like to think of it. I hope they go on forever and ever. Amen. This piece is entitled "The Coal Men." The 2-story attached house I grew up in Queens was heated by steam radiators, as were all the other houses in the neighborhood then. The fuel was coal. Only much later, after the war, did my father convert to gas. The system must have been an efficient one, as I don't recall being other than very cozy in the wintertime indoors. I may not be a reliable reporter in this, as I believe the monstrous self-absorption of children is such that it anesthetizes them to physical discomfort. The soft hissing sound from the silver-painted hot radiators was a comfortable one, and they were good for drying wet gloves and snowsuits. The furnace itself was in the basement. It was a great bulbous black cast iron thing about 5 feet high and 3 feet wide. It had 2 doors. The larger top one had a slide-open grill so you could check to see how well the fire was going. The bottom one had a handle attached to the fire grate to allow the shaking down of burnt cinders. My father lit the fire at the beginning of winter, and it stayed lit until spring. I suppose my mother added a few shovelfuls of coal during the day. When my brother was old enough and my mother began working, he was given this assignment. He recently told me he was proud of this first big boy job. When my father came home from work, he put some more coal on the fire. Before going to bed, he would bank the fire and closed a small panel at the top of the furnace. This reduced the amount of air entering the fire chamber, causing the fire to burn less vigorously during the night. Opposite the furnace, there were 2 coal bins, the size of small rooms. There was a pass-through between them to the other half of the cellar. A couple of times a winter, we would get coal deliveries. A coal truck with enormous black solid rubber tires pulled up to the curb on 112th Road next to our backyard fence, and one of the 2-man team would alert my mother. She then went down to unlock both the inner door and the slanted wooden one over the concrete steps leading onto the backyard. A long telescoping metal chute would be positioned down the steps. One man held a wooden barrel under the hatch at the back of the truck and with a lever released coal into it. He hoisted the barrel onto his shoulder, his jacket protected by a thick square of soiled canvas, and carried it up the 3 steps into the yard. Then he deftly rolled it on its bottom metal rim to the chute and dumped the coal in. It clattered down to the cellar floor, where his partner stood ready to shovel it into the nearer bin. As the level in the bin rose, that man would slide planks into place in brackets in the bin's entrance to keep the coal within bounds. When the pile was about 3 feet high, they started on the other bin. I can't remember this for sure, nor can my brother. I went back and forth watching the barrel man from the back window and halfway down the cellar stairs to peek at the shoveling man. When they were finished, they swept up the pile of coal dust from in front of the bins and came to the back door with the bill for my mother to sign. She paid them in cash from a small snap-top leather purse in her apron, and I never saw her write a check. My father did that. The coal men stood just inside the kitchen from the pantry and respectfully took off their caps. There was a pink strip of brow between their blackened faces and their sparse, greasy hair. They were very big, but they were not young. The boys were all away at the war. They were impressively dirty. I myself was no stranger to dirt, often playing in the grassless backyard, crouched down making mud pies. My mother let me get as dirty as I wanted to. An oft-repeated quip of our neighbor May Eshman was, "I'm glad I don't have to launder that child's underpants." I tried not to stare at the coalmen. Their heavy trousers, jackets, and boots glistened so thickly with coal dust that they seemed almost pearlized. Standing on the counter was a bottle of rye whiskey my mother had taken from under the dining room sideboard, along with 2 small glasses. My parents always had rye on hand. Rye and ginger was the cocktail served to guests on festive occasions. The Presbyterian considered a more sophisticated version using club soda as a mixer, and which was suggested by my father's brother Tom, the police detective, was introduced much later. Then came what to me was an always dramatic moment. "Gentlemen, will you have a little schnapps?" my mother would ask. "Don't mind if we do," replied the spokesman, his partner nodding in agreement. My mother handed each of them a small glass, filling it almost to the brim. The amber liquid disappeared very quickly, it seemed to me. "And will you have another?" she always asked. "Don't mind if we do," said the spokesman, adding, by way of excusing what might seem a lack of temperance, "It's cold out there today." Then they retreated through the pantry door, down the back steps, and roared away in their chain-driven axle truck. If ours was the tip given at all deliveries, they must have been rubber-legged at day's end. Recently, when I told this story to my son, he was incredulous. "She tipped them with booze?" he exclaimed. My husband came to my mother's defense, saying this was a job perk expected not only by coal delivery men back then, but also by men delivering ice. His mother routinely rewarded both with whiskey. My son persisted. "Imagine if you offered such a tip today to a delivery man. What in the world would he think?" The hilarity of it struck us, and we all roared laughing. I do know that my very dignified U.S. Postal Service package man would be deeply offended. As for the buff young UPS fellow in his work boots and brown shorts and open neck shirt, who knows? He might think I was another lonely housewife of a certain age, hoping he would tarry with me for a while.
Okay, Julia Pane, and I usually write mysteries, which are short mysteries, but are a little longer than this audience could handle. So I used one of Mitch's prompts, and the prompt is, "I'm not half the person I used to be," I said one morning, looking in the mirror. This is called Black Friday. I am a person who avoids sales, any sales. If I want an item and I can afford it, I buy it. I don't shop. I hate shopping. But once, just once, I broke my own rule. It was a year ago. My niece called to say that she was coming to New York for a week. I had not really seen my younger sister's daughter for some years, and I remembered her as a gawky, big-eyed, innocent teenager with braces. The trip would be mostly for business. She would be busy the first 3 days with interviews and meetings. But as she was going to be in New York over Thanksgiving, I did not want the poor lamb to be without a place to go for Thanksgiving dinner, so we invited her to dine with us. Catherine arrived about noon on Thanksgiving Day. We would be eating around 2. The young woman who walked into the apartment was anything but a gawky teenager, and her teeth and her smile were perfect. She was very stylishly dressed with a flattering hairstyle and a certain sophisticated way of handling herself that made me take back my whole idea of her ever being a poor lamb who needed any kind of support. She brought chocolates, very expensive chocolates, and a bottle of Prosecco, which we shared before dinner. She had a humorous way of presenting her experiences of the past 3 days she had spent in the city, and we didn't mind that she pretty much dominated the dinner conversation. There were only the 3 of us anyhow, and we needed some new stories around the table. Toward the end of the meal, she announced she was looking forward to a major shopping spree on Black Friday. In fact, it was to be the highlight of her visit. She asked me where I usually found the best bargains. I never shop on Black Friday, I had to confess. "Oh, Aunt Meg," she said, "I've been looking through all the ads, and there are some marvelous sales going on. I was hoping that you would go with me." Now, I'm not a coward, but the idea of shopping madness had absolutely no appeal to me. However, it was a request from my youngest sister's daughter, and I found myself saying I would go. "We have to be at Macy's when they open the doors," she said. And so I found myself arriving at her hotel while it was still dark to make the trek to Macy's first, and then to about 6 other places that she had outlined in a list. We were not the first, but we were not too far back in the line. I was still not prepared for the push when the doors opened. The tidal wave hit me and shoved me forward right into the side of the door. I was stunned by the force of the blow and somewhat dizzy, but I could hear Catherine's voice, "Come on, Aunt Mag, we have to get to the escalator quickly." So I stumbled after her, half blinded by the blow I had received. People pushed and shoved up the escalator. A particularly large woman was determined to pass me and squeezed me against the side of the escalator and almost backwards off the step. But I held on to the side railing for dear life. I lost sight of Catherine, but I could hear her voice, "Hurry up, Aunt Meg, this way." Somewhere beyond this tsunami of human flesh, my niece was still charging on. As I reached her side, she grabbed about 6 items off a rack and thrust them into my arms. She had several more in hers. "They won't let us try on more than 3 at a time," she said. "You just stand right there." And I stood outside the fitting room while she joined the line. I had only a moment to catch my breath when a loud voice nearly deafened me. "Well, are you online or not?" I tried to move backwards out of the woman's way when I lost my balance and fell against a display case. As I tried to get up, several hands reached down, not to help me, but to pull the dresses from my arms. "Stop, stop," I said, but the dresses were gone. My head hurt and my back was throbbing where the corner of the display case had stabbed me. I could do nothing but stand as much out of the way as possible and wait for my niece to return. "Where are the other dresses?" she asked, a little petulantly, as I stood there obviously empty-handed. "Someone grabbed them out of my arms," I said. "And you didn't stop them?" Gone was the pleasant, humorous nature, and in its place was the killer instinct of the dedicated shopper. "I was lying on the floor," I replied. "And you couldn't hold on to them? You just let them take them? What kind of a New Yorker are you, Aunt Meg?" "I wasn't born here," I replied, as she squeezed between people and tried to keep up with her as she marched off to another area of the store. We arrived at the bedding department, where she announced that she was getting some sheets for her mother. I was effectively stopped from following her by 2 women who were having a tug-of-war with a down pillow. I tried to go around them, but as one woman lost her hold, the other woman fell over backwards right on top of me. At least 2 people stepped on me, wearing heels. When I tried to get up, my ankle had a sharp pain. I felt around the floor for my pocketbook when I heard one woman say, "What a nice handbag, I'll buy it." She was trying to give it to the sales clerk, who said, "We don't do handbags at this register. Handbags are on a lower level." I reached out and put my hand on the bag before the woman could leave. She turned with a frenetic, jerky movements that still holding my bag in a vise-like grip and fixed me with a stare that was slightly insane. "It's mine," I said. "I dropped it when I fell." She tried to snatch the bag away, but I held on. This, at least, was something I was willing to fight for. "Oh, no, you don't," she said. "This is just the kind of purse I have been looking for. But it belongs to me. It has all my things in it. I brought it from home." The light dawned, and she almost threw the purse in my face. "Well, if you feel that way about it," and she marched off. Catherine showed up about that time. "Aunt Meg, you just have to keep up. People are getting all the best bargains. We have to move." And so we marched on. At least she marched. I limped. My head throbbed. My back had shooting pains, and my ankle was swelling inside my shoe. "Catherine," I said, "I think I need to sit down." "Oh, Aunt Meg, we've barely started. This is fun. Aren't you having fun? It's exciting." "Well, I think this kind of fun may be a little too exciting for someone of my years. I think that you will shop faster without me. I'm going to take a taxi and go home." "Oh, Aunt Meg, don't go. We've barely started, and I have the cutest little restaurant in mind for after we finish." "I'm afraid I have already finished. I'm going to take the taxi home. Call me when you get back to the hotel." I limped and fought my way back to the entrance, where I hailed a cab. As for all the promise of spectacular bargains, I returned home empty-handed, with absolutely nothing to show for the great sales day. I tallied the cost. The strap of my pocketbook had been broken in the struggle with the crazy lady. The round trip by cab from home and to home cost me over $40. My husband took one look at the black and blue lumps swelling on my head and my puffy ankle, and he insisted that we go to our neighborhood doctor. Just walking in the door of the doctor's office started the tab at over $200. The slight concussion gave me a headache for 3 days. The ankle was bandaged. The pill for the back pain cost another $10 copay. My back pain made me stand at an angle that aged me about 20 years. On Saturday morning, I looked in the mirror. "I'm not half the person I used to be," I commented, and I went back to bed.
My name is Kira Aronson. I have attended Mitch's classes for several years and have gotten a lot of inspiration and joy from them. I wrote a little poem called Little Brother. Little brother with flaxen hair and eyes so blue, an angel, as my mother says, compared to you. He follows me around the house and outdoors too. No matter where I wander, he sticks to me like glue. I like to play with friends my age and run around with verve, but little brother tags along, irritates my nerves. I run away and hide from him. He goes whining to our mother. She says I have to play with him, look after little brother. I take him to the dusky woods to look for blueberries. Rabbit droppings on the ground look most appealing. Look, I say, blueberries. Have some, little brother. He stares at them with some surprise, then picks them up with vigor. Do you like the berries? Yes, I do, he says with glee. Choose the pungent pellets. With awe he looks at me. Many years pass by, and now little brother is 6'2", a father and a grandfather. He's almost 62. Brother dear, do you recall when you were very young, I made you eat rabbit dung? He answers, no way, no, no. He could never be such a fool. He's sure I made up this tale. I'm relieved, the guilt is off my mind, and his self-esteem is saved. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sharon Cesario, and I've been a student of Mitch's for several years. I always wanted to go to college, but I never felt I could do it. I always wanted to write, and my husband always said, you can do it. So one day he sent me off on a Sunday to go check out a class at St. Francis. I opened the door, I saw two people who were apparently a little older than me, and I said, I don't belong here. And I said, well, you know what, give it a try, see what it's like. I sat down, that was several years ago, and I've been glad I've come every Sunday since. The Sundays that we have them is like, to some people it's football Sunday, well, to us it's writing Sunday. It's something we all look forward to, and like a good coach, Mitch guides us all into a final game that we can all enjoy. And everybody on the team all works together. Not one of us stands up and says, oh, you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't. We all support and guide each other. So I'm really grateful that I did open that door and sit down in that seat. Two things I'm going to read today, and one of them is something I dedicated to my son who's gone since 2007. It's called A Promise Now Forever. When I promised you that I would love you forever and a day, I meant it. Even if you are no longer physically here with me, I will love you. You know, when I make a promise, I always said it was like it could be written in blood. So when you left this world to go to heaven, memories of times with you. Good or bad, happy or sad, we always knew what and how strong a bond our love for each other was. No matter how the days went, I know some were very bad, then memories of promises made to you kept are what keep me strong. The beauty of a rainbow after the rain is also a promise of a new day, bridging us back to the reality of life and lighting the way for us to go every day. The next one is called time, and it's significant because we all take time for granted, and as you age, you start to become more aware of the minutes, the seconds, and appreciate them more. So I wrote time, just a four-letter word, but it holds a lot of significance in people's lives. The word is short and sweet, and definitely to the point. So too shall this prose be the same. Time is something we take for granted and also advantage of, never believing that it will ever run out. Sadly, we find out that it can and does at odd times and in different ways. When we park at a parking meter and the money we put in runs out, our car receives a ticket that we were parked for over 5 minutes at an expired meter. That phone call or visit that you want to make but can never seem to find the time to do it, well, when you do find the moment to spare, the persons you wanted to visit with are no longer there. Maybe they have moved, changed their phone number, or prophetically gone on to their heavenly reward. How we then say we wish we had the time back to spend with them. Maybe, like I said before, it is something we all take for granted now and then. The moments of memories that we have and share from the times in the past will have to do in that case. Does anyone know what the dictionary's definition of the word time is? I will tell you. Time, 1, a period, during which an action, process, or condition exists or continues. 2, a point or period when something occurs, an occasion. 3, a set or customary moment or hour for something to occur. 4, an age or era. 5, state of affairs or conditions. 6, a moment, hour, day, or year is indicated by a clock or calendar. 7, a rate of speed. 8, one of a series of recurring instances. 10, a person's experiences during a particular period. 11, the hours or days of one's work. 12, time out. That is the extent of the moments I will take of your time. Before I time out completely, I would like to leave you all with this thought. Time is a gift we all get when we are born. The moments of memories made from it are up to each one of us individually. Let us not waste it. Unwrap it like the gift it is, and start from today. That is why it is called a present. I see in my hourglass that time for prose is up. It is just that, a means to the end.
My name is Nancy Jones, and in these wonderful classes that I've been attending, I've been writing about my experiences in the Middle East and in 1958, and it has turned out to be a book. So to spare you, I have chosen something I wrote some time ago because, and I'm going to read it because it's short, and it's about caregiving. It occurred to me that at our age, we've all been caregivers to either elderly parents or spouses or children. The current estimate is that there are 43 million adults out there caring for their loved ones, and that estimate will probably grow as the baby boomers come into the equation. The family caregivers save the government billions of dollars with their free care. And it is a very lonely and very frustrating job, and the piece I'm going to read reflects this. I took care of my ailing mother for 25 years. She died at the age of 94, never expecting to live as long as she did because her generation had a much shorter life expectancy. The piece is called We Grow Old Together, and it was written during this period of care. We are growing old together, my mother and I. We are becoming irascible and irritated with each other and the world. I can no longer see her point of view. She knows it and gets angry and short-tempered with me, her caretaker. Sometimes I think we are locked in some kind of death struggle that no one will win. We will die together, like in the old Western movies, rolling down a precipice, struggling and punching to be free of each other. I hate myself when I think this way. Society has imposed its standards on my conscience, and I have violated the norms. We have both violated the norms. She is supposed to be frail and meek and submissively grateful. She is not. She is stubborn, willful, domineering, and insufferable. I am supposed to be dedicated and loving and willingly subservient. Instead, I am frustrated, angry, and resentful. Neither of us is ennobled by our relationship, neither caregiver nor care receiver. But we are in this great adventure, and we are making the best of it. And that is our real bond. We respect each other for the effort, not the result. It is in these moments that our feelings become tender and merciful and forgiving. We expose our vulnerabilities, take note, and move on to the next day, to the next crisis, or to the next inevitable angry confrontation. Neither of us wants to be in the situation we're in, but it is there, and we tackle it with our own self-surviving brand of honesty. And for that alone, we deserve respect and honor from each other. I just want to add one thing before I leave, and that is that older people are often invisible citizens. But I do think that if we have one thing to give, it should be wisdom. And this sponsored program of creative writing for seniors allows wise words to be written and spoken. For this I am grateful and wallow in the wise words of my fellow writers. And most importantly, we have a teacher, Mitch Levenberg, who provides encouragement and the inviting environment for these words to flourish. Thank you.
I have two short pieces that I want to read. The first one is called Reflections. As we gaze into the pool, we see our reflections of our past, things that have us better through change and things that we cannot change. As I look back on reflections of my life, there are some things that I have changed, and then the pebble drops into the pool, causing a rippling effect, and everything starts moving about. When the water stops moving, you see a different image. My second piece is called Today, Yesterday, and Tomorrow. Today I will release all things of yesterday that has put a strain on my heart. All the things that are negative I will put behind me and look forward to a new beginning. And all the positive things I will enhance. Prepare myself for tomorrow, for the forthcomings you cannot see. Look out for stumbling blocks and potholes. Stay ever alert for the unexpected curveball. Yesterday have not caught up with my tomorrow, which I take in with a daily prayer, which helps me through my days. One day I will be able to step into my tomorrow.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Camille Bering. I'm a native Brooklyn gal, and I recently passed a milestone last year. I turned 60 years old, and I'm very mindful of that, and here are some of my thoughts. In my 61 years, what I've learned are the following. I'm committed to simplifying my life, only replacing what's worn out or malfunctioning. Cash is paid or nothing is bought. Live below my means and know there's a difference between a need and a want. And we really don't need all that much. In contemporary American culture, success is considered getting what you want. I am more inclined to agree with motivational speaker Dale Carnegie, who defined happiness as wanting what you get. We should always behave properly, as if our mom were watching and wouldn't be embarrassed by our behavior. Do things or not because it's the right thing to do. This is a matter of integrity. Also, a man who treats his body with integrity is less inclined to ingest illegal, unknown substances. College isn't for everybody. Some folks are largely self-taught. Blue-collar workers and tradesmen should all be respected as much as boardroom CEOs. Years of choir singing training has taught me to speak clearly, mindful of diction and pronunciation. Elevate your English whenever possible. I'll always remember the street sweeper I once met with the vocal command of James Earl Jones. I've learned never to negotiate except from a position of strength. This brings me to a painful subject which has been receiving wide coverage in the news lately, bullying. Regarding episodes of bullying behavior and other malfeasance, of which I was a victim in high school, it is the predator coward who senses the vulnerability of a loner and gathers his cabal to torment. I've learned that domination or intimidation of others often comes about through bluff. We have a responsibility to protect the weak. The natural impulse of men is to follow, and whoever has the strongest sense of purpose will always dominate the rest. I've memorized the Christopher's motto, I am only one, but I am one. I can't do everything, but I can do something. And what I can do, I will do. Since my early years, history of all kinds, including historical novels, have always intrigued me. For me to read a work of fiction, it must be prize-winning or acclaimed piece. If this makes me a literary snob, so be it. I am also very selective in people I keep company with, recalling the old axiom, you are known by the company you keep. I've made it a practice to avoid hating people. If someone has acted despicably, I try to forget them. Regarding gossiping, remember that the gossiper needs a listener. Refrain from being either. Take custody of your tongue. Sometimes memories I didn't know I still possess come back flooding to me, set off by a touch, a sound, a smell, a color glimpsed. I admire intact families, couples who are indeed committed to each other and don't walk away from a marriage if things, quote, aren't working out. The benefits of two-parent families to children are incalculable. We all age, the senses grow dull, the limbs grow weak, sight, hearing, and even teeth die before we do. This period on earth is a reckoned portion, but it's not our permanent life. Remember, we're just passing through. He that conquereth his own soul is greater than he who taketh a city, says the Bible. And your good name also outlives you, and it is our soul that survives and goes elsewhere. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Peter Pane, and I'm going to read part of a memoir that I started maybe 2 years ago. And if I can bring myself to stop editing it, changing every paragraph, I may finish it someday. But the idea of doing it was, there were two reasons really. One was that I regret never asking my father questions about, for instance, he wasn't a professional musician, but he played all these instruments. He was really a custom tailor, but music was uppermost. That was part of the family scene. But I don't know where he learned to play the cornet or the xylophone or even the mandolin. And even though he lived to be 83. So I decided to write stuff down because my own children, when I tell them stories, said, "Dad, why don't you write it down?" Well, this class was a wonderful opportunity to do it. I've been encouraged. And I started backwards, starting with, well, my experience in World War II, and I'm down to about 1934 now. So you can figure it out. My father began teaching me music when I was 8 years of age. I was given a mandolin. I learned to read music, and eventually I played well enough to perform with him in a mandolin orchestra called the Melodians in their weekly Sunday afternoon radio broadcast in Scranton, Pennsylvania. He played the cornet in a local church band he also played the cornet in a local church band known as St. Anthony's Band. Every summer, the band would be engaged to play on days celebrating and honoring certain saints of the Catholic Church. Marching through various streets and sections of the town, the band brought up the rear of the parade. Leading it was a statue of the saint atop a platform borne by 4 or 6 men. Many stops were made along the way to accept donations made in honor of the saint. Often during these stops, refreshments for the musicians and the band were provided, wine for the men, and soda for the younger players. I remember in particular a Mr. Cicchio. He was a clarinetist who, after drinking half of the wine, would pour the remainder on a chamois cloth swab, intentionally soaking it. Because clarinets are made of wood, the chance of its developing cracks is always a concern. Therefore, chamois cloths are used to swab out the moisture that collects in the interior of the instrument. But playing outdoors on a hot mid-July day when the instrument has been heated by the sun does not usually produce moisture from condensation. We suspect that as he marched along, Mr. Cicchio enjoyed inhaling the residual odor and the lingering taste of the wine emanating from the interior of his clarinet. Once we asked him, "What's the deal with the swab in the wine?" His response, given in his pronounced Italianesque English, was as follows: "You see, the wine of barrel, she never cracks, so it's good for the clarinetto to put the wine inside." By age 14, I too was a member of that band as a budding saxophone player. I had started playing the alto sax about age 9, taking lessons at a prominent music store in the city of Scranton. I had excellent teachers, one an outstanding clarinetist and band director of the best concert band in the Northeast region of Pennsylvania. He had graduated from the Institute of Musical Art in New York, which later merged with the Juilliard School of Music, and which he attended on a scholarship. The big bands were at their peak in the early 1940s, and I began to get interested in them and their featured soloists. Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw were favorites. Both were popular band leaders and outstanding clarinetists whose playing styles differed greatly and who had influenced a generation of clarinet players. Local dance bands were abundant in the city, and I began playing with several of them, thereby earning my first pay as a musician. But I had to join, and I did join, the American Federation of Musicians, Local 120 of Scranton, Pennsylvania. During my senior year in high school, roughly 1943 to 44, many of the older musicians were away serving in some branch of the United States Armed Services. To fill the gap, band leaders began to hire school-age musicians like me. In 1943, I got a job playing 5 nights per week with a band at a hotel in the city. The actual venue, though, was in a dimly lit, smoke-filled room catering to couples who danced, chatted, and sipped cocktails throughout the evening. The realization that some of those couples were not necessarily with their own spouses dawned on me when one night I spotted the father of one of my high school buddies dancing arm in arm, cheek to cheek, with a woman who was not his wife. He did not see me, though I was certainly visible as they danced past the band. Having visited my friend at his home many times, I knew his mother reasonably well and liked her. But because of what I had witnessed that evening, I limited any visits to those times when I knew that neither of his parents would be at home. It was a dilemma for me that was never resolved. My work as a young musician increased as I began playing at summer resorts in the nearby Pocono Mountains. That ended in 1944, when in May of that year, I entered the U.S. Navy. That's it.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Bernadette Basta. I've been in this class about two years. This will be like the 3rd year that I'm attending this class. I have to tell you a little bit how I got to this class. I sent for brochures from St. Francis, what they had to offer seniors. And when I saw the brochure, I saw this particular class mentioned. With my friend across the street, Arnitha, who has already given you some poetry, I said to her, this is perfect for you and myself, because you have volumes of poetry that you have written, and I have nothing that I have kept that I wrote, but we came to the class. Most of the people that are here were in the class at the time. We sat in the back. Why? Because we were a little intimidated. Because the people that got up spoke so beautifully. I said, oh my goodness, I'll never be able to do that. Well, do you know what the class said to me? They said to me, everyone has their own style. Everyone can write, and you can write beautifully. I was much encouraged over the weeks that I did say my pieces, because people said, you're talking from the heart, and you're talking about life, and that's what's important. What happens to me, I use his prompts sometimes, but not all the time. I use what comes into here. One word, or something someone did, and I can write from that. And I write not beautifully, but it's my style. And I am very encouraged that Mitch thinks and the class thinks that all our styles are important. Okay, that's it, I'm done. Okay, my piece today is called English/American. We live in America, but do we speak American? Not even English do we speak. What do we speak? America is a melting pot of every nation in the world. When we were in school, we were learning English. The days were spent learning parts of speech, terms, correct forms to use in a sentence, and of course, vocabulary. America, in its infancy, was invaded by France, England, and Spain. The early settlers came for freedom and religious tolerance. They brought with them their own dialects. The Indians, who were Native Americans, spoke in their own dialects. Slaves that were brought from Africa brought dialects, but were forced to learn the language of their masters. After mass migration in the 18th through the 21st centuries, people brought their own languages to America. And many of the expressions we use today were brought from other countries. Think of how we speak. For example, Yiddish/English expressions. Kanahara, thank God. L'chaim, to life, we toast at weddings and holidays. Gesundheit, when we sneeze. Oy vey, oh boy. Cockamamie, mixed up. Nosh, a snack. Belch, a burp. Mazel tov, good luck. And of course, one we all use, schmear, a little bit of butter on my bagel or a cream cheese. If each of us examined our background expressions from our own ethnic past, they creep into everyday conversations with family and friends. My parents were from Scotland and Ireland. When my sister and I were asked, what country did we come from? Some expressions I remember from my Scottish mother was the word shed. To us in America, it meant a small house in the backyard, but to my Scotch mother, it meant the part in your head was crooked. My mother would also say, oh God, excuse me, the papers are sticking together. Kilkenny. This meant go easy. Don't you dare go for seconds. Other people have to eat. And she'd say, "Akai," means oh yes. A sweetie was a cookie with sugar on it. As I age, I remember these expressions and try to pass them on to my children and my grandchildren. My friends used to come over. They loved to come over to my house. To see me? No. But to hear my mother speak, because the Scotch people speak with a rrr. They roll their R's. Going back to America versus English language, there are other things to consider. Where do we live? Brooklyn. But do we speak Brooklynese? Example, oil. Earl. I moved around a lot, so I speak a mixture of my heritage and the places I've lived. I went to a convention and roomed with a girl from Oklahoma. She got such a kick out of my Brooklyn accent. She particularly wanted me to say the word water. She'd say to me, "Bernadette, say water for me." I could have said 20 or 30 words before she even uttered the word water. So you see, we are in America. The pronunciation and sounds of words are different. Welcome all new people. Bring us some new words and new expressions from your native land. It truly enriches our English/American language. It contributes to making our English/American language unique in the whole world. Thank you.
My name is Lily, and it's an honor to be reading for you this afternoon and to be part of this community facilitated with caring and respect for writing and writers, Professor Mitch Levenberg. The writer Virginia Woolf said that writing is like walking through a dark room with a lantern which illuminates the things that were always there. This group has become part of my lantern. I'm going to read two poems. The first is called Credenza, which, as you probably know, is a type of china closet. It's a word taken from the Italian for trust or belief, and it became a metaphor for this poem. The poem has two parts. Credenza, part one. In the dark wood of memory, the old mother has lost her way. Searching for a path, she thinks she has a key. Remembering the ornate cupboard, she peers through the glass doors, seeing the wine goblets, their mouths fragile and thin. She does not know when they were last filled. She focuses on the plates, remembering how she got them, her kitchen money, the monthly savings. What did he say? You can't even eat off them. Her blue eyes widen, traveling inward, but it is of no use. The plates are as they were then, the hens, large yellow birds, flecked with vermilion, their necks swivel, some looking sideways, afraid, as if the fox waits outside the plate, outside the cupboard. Part two. My sister Lynn says it's not a credenza, but a china closet, because our mother would never buy furniture without legs. The long line, my sister intones, using our mother's way of holding the last word of her sentence, the way a lover holds who or what she's loving just a bit longer. You know, Lynn says, the wood is pecan, and when it was delivered, they brought a pine cabinet, and Mommy made them bring it back. I thought of the men carrying this large curio up, then down the stairs, and then returning again up the stairs with the other. And I thought of our mother that last year being carried down and up the stairs by the EMT until it was only one way. I look at the contents of this case, the 4 sets of stemware, lined at attention, smaller glasses at the sides and middle, the French jewel-cut vase, the good china, white porcelain with gold-etched rims, the antique plates, hand-painted, purchased one each month on installment. What can we judge of what a person holds dear, needs, wants, and where and how she chooses to show it? In the furniture store, she keyed an X on the back of what was to be hers. Lynn, not yet in school, was with her then. And now, when we are clearing the house, claiming what will be ours, we push the chest from the dining room wall, and there the X remains, as if you can mark what is yours with the letter we solve for when we know only part of the equation. I have a second poem. Do I have time for the second? Oh. The second poem is called The Lotus is Midnight Blue. The lotus is midnight blue, not its ordinary color, but since it is folded paper, gracing the coffee table, I say nothing. Some nocturnal exercise our son has undertaken, perhaps to teach his first-grade class math. So when he asks what CAR is, I think it's some joke. until I realize it's an acronym for the sick days a teacher has. Then he mentions a girl, a woman really, the same age as he, a new ESL teacher of Chinese kindergarten who needs chemo, and the principal's note to donate days to her if possible. It is what union members do, if they can, I say. He nods his head. He has no CAR. 2 weeks later, he says, she's lost her hair. The women teachers are wearing solidarity scarves. The lotus is midnight blue, I think. Show me how to fold, I ask. Carefully, he takes 2 pieces of thin paper, perfect squares. Follow my hands, he says. His fingers are long and slender. He folds perfect triangles while mine are so-so. It takes practice, he says, as he makes me count aloud as if I am a child. His hands are all grace, like the wings of a bird, but he is patient with how slowly I fold. 24 folds at first, then those folds become 16 flaps, bended until they become burgeoning leaves, the center open, the way the lotus is before it flowers, open to pain and joy, seemingly empty, although in my experience, nothing is empty. I have taught her class to make the folds. Each day one of them leaves a lotus on her desk, he says. It is magic, I say, the way paper can become a flower. Yes, he says, it is the way paper can become a poem.
Thank you, everybody. That was wonderful. My class is always asking, every class they always ask me, do you have anything to read? And I always make some sort of excuse, that we have no more time or, next week, whatever. Anyway, I thought I would just end today's reading by reading a very small piece, very short piece, which really has a lot to do with who we are and what our class is like. And it's called Reading Without Glasses. So, if I can find it here. The prompt for my senior citizen class today was a crushed pizza box causes a sensation at the museum. Our first reader forgot her glasses. She wrote about a character finding a crushed pizza box, which later is hailed by the museum director as a masterpiece of abstract art. As she read, I did notice a kind of disconnect of things going on, but imagined it was for effect, a kind of intentional disunity of language and meaning, almost as if she was skipping lines. Later, Ellen told me she was skipping lines, not to create any particular effect, she had no such intention, but because she had trouble seeing. Wasn't Monet and other impressionists thought to be nearsighted? And wasn't this responsible for one of the great art movements in history? This reminded me of the time I did a reading at a bar in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, back in the early 90s when I first discovered I needed reading glasses. I remember being on a stage where the lighting wasn't very good, and when I looked at my story, I suddenly realized I could barely make out the words. So I began to read slowly, deliberately, word by word, as if I were intentionally trying to create a world in slow motion, like in a film when the camera tries to slow down a bullet fired from a gun, or an intentional distortion of human mouths in the midst of verbal confrontation. Indeed, the story was a story about the attempt to slow things down, to examine human behavior and action in a measured and deliberate way. But it was really the fact that I could not see very well, that I could barely make out the words, that suddenly, without warning, like a cruel joke, like something out of one of my own stories, I had become farsighted. At certain times, the stress and strain of making out my own words, of combining them with others to form sentences, of the very struggle of getting to the finish line, was almost too much to bear. And yet, when I finally finished reading, I felt I had been up there for hours, and much to my surprise, the audience actually applauded, enthusiastically even. And when I returned to my table, all my friends congratulated me for the interesting way I read the story. You gave it the ominous post-apocalyptic tone it needed, one friend said. Needless to say, we are no longer friends. That's the kind of comment you say to yourself and not aloud. It was as if having almost drowned in rough waters by flailing and thrashing, had been seen by others as a new type of breaststroke. "Well done," they'd call out. "You really look like you were drowning." I was. I began to wonder, is a story because of the way I see it? Does it cease to exist the moment I close my eyes or my vision becomes too blurred to read it without glasses? No. The story is done. It has a life of its own voice that I, its creator, has given it. It must not and cannot become a victim or slave of the reader's bad vision or physical and mental condition at the time. There are all sorts of physical conditions under which you can read a story. I've read a story after a few beers and found myself reading without much of an edge or any real emotion, but more of a high-pitched over-emotion. And then what about reading with a headache, when only relentless pain seems to accompany the character's world, or when you're in a bad mood, or good mood, or existential mood, or post-structural mood? You can't be sure of anything. It's too unpredictable. The next time I read that story, and right before I uttered a single word, I decided to take my glasses off. But when I did, it was all blur. My eyes had gotten even worse than the last time. I could barely make out a single word. This time I thought I would truly drown. So I put my glasses back on because I knew the very least I owed my story was to see where it would lead and where it would lead me. Thank you. That's about writing process. I don't really know what it means. Anyway, can we have another real big, rousing round of applause, kicking, screaming for our great readers? They're wonderful, and thank you so much. Anyway, until next year. So thank you so much for coming, and I wanted to say one thing, though. Rose Fontanella, who's on our list, was unable to make it today. She's one of the stars of our class, and very, very funny, and she things came up, and she just wasn't able to make it, so